call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals, a regular meeting for September 25th, 2024. First item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum. With 3 of the 5 members of the board present, we do have a quorum today. Next item is public comments. Has anyone reached out to city staff to make any comments prior to our meeting today?
Chair Young, we haven't heard from anyone.
All right. Next item is a consideration of the minutes from our regular meeting on August 28th, 2024. A copy of those minutes were sent to the board members. Are there any changes necessary to those?
No, sir.
Hearing none, those will stand as written. And we'll move on to old business. First item under special use permits is application Z24031 by Ms. Davina Ikmanwosa, reconsidering a request for a special use permit in order to operate a group daycare home in a duplex residential RD zone. This is for property located at 2537 Summit Court. Mr. Aguilera, if you'd review that application for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair Young. As you mentioned, this first item under our old business today is reconsideration of a special use permit request to operate a group daycare at the property of 2537 Summit Court. I won't spend too much time talking about the details again, but as a refresher, this is a special use permit request for a group daycare. Ms. Davina had previously applied for a family daycare home at this property. She had come back to the board back in July to request a special use permit to allow her to operate a group daycare home, which would allow her to go up to 12 kids and for 3 employees. That item was heard. Due to the circumstances that happened, the signs not being posted, that item then had to again be heard at the August meeting. During that August 28th meeting, staff informed the board that Ms. Davina had submitted to staff on August 27th a traffic impact study for her proposed group daycare home. As you all may recall, we didn't have enough time to include that study in the agenda because the agenda had already been posted, and so the board recommended a deferral so that staff could review that further. And so because we didn't have enough time to review on its merit, we wanted to make sure that it was deferred so that we could have our staff, our traffic engineer, review that study further and present those findings to you all today. And so in preparation for today's meeting, staff required that Ms. Davina submit any other supporting evidence to give staff proper time for this review. Ms. Davina's attorney, Mr. John Barney, submitted to staff on September 9th a digital link to videos and photos of Oakland High School activities, including a motorcycle class that is held on campus every weekend between now and November 30th. As said, our traffic engineer did have time to review the study and made the determination, as you can see on the addendum item here in our staff report. They issued the 2 following points for your review. This traffic projections and intersection analysis were completed correctly, and the study is in good order. However, the second point made, the proposed pickup and drop-off area will change the character of the residential street and may pose on-street parking and staging challenges to existing residents on Summit Court. As such, based on the information provided by the study and the opinion of the Transportation Department, the increased number of cars, potential staging challenges in conflict with other residential properties will pose challenges at Summit Court. The parking and staging concerns could affect the neighboring properties in the following ways, and these include by blocking free use of the driveways, USPS access to mailboxes, and Murfreesboro Fire Rescue Department access to the fire hydrants. Staff recommends that the BZA deliberate further on the new findings and give a clear recommendation of approval or denial today. As I said in the addendum and for today's presentation, the applicant's attorney has submitted, again, digital evidence of the surrounding areas, of photos in the driveway, and again of Oakland High School. If you would like to see that is available, but that is all for staff's presentation today. If you have any questions, I'm here, as well as Ms. Davina's representative and another representative who did the traffic impact studies here as well, should you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Aguilera at this point?
No, sir.
No. I guess I'll give the applicant an opportunity or if the representative wants to provide something, that's give them the full chance to.
Good afternoon. John Barney here for Ms. Davina. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because this is the first we're here seeing this from the traffic study, the Transportation Department regarding the actual Summit Street that the house is on. Our whole position on this is that it wouldn't cause a substantial or an undue impact on this neighborhood. I don't know, as you all have seen, there's a circular drive. She's already started construction on it that will be for pickup and drop-off. Nobody will be parking on the street. In fact, the videos that we submitted and pictures that we submitted show that with regard to parking for her and for her employees that will be working there is in the back of the property. Very large parking area that's accessed from Oakland Drive. It's not even accessed from Summit. It's almost directly across the street from the Oakland High School parking lot. With regard to the rest of the standards, we thought that there might be concerns regarding noise, and so we submitted videos to show that, first of all, this isn't some sleepy little neighborhood tucked away somewhere. This is right on DeJarnette Lane, right across from Oakland High School. 2 other schools are right there. The Oakland High School marching band practices every evening right across the street from this neighborhood. There are motorcycle classes every weekend, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. So we don't think noise is going to be a concern. Again, with regard to proposed pickup and drop-off area will change the character of the residential street and may pose on-street parking and staging challenges to existing residents on Summit Court. Don't know how that's possible or where that's coming from. Again, there's not going to be any on-street parking. There's a circular drive for pickup and drop-off. Nobody's going to be blocking mail delivery, especially considering we're talking about pickup and drop-off being between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., and then pickup late afternoon up till 5:30. So there's 2 very discrete areas of time. The rest of the day, there's not going to be any traffic as a result of this. And like I said, we have plenty of proof that there's plenty of room for parking behind her house that is accessed from Oakland Drive. If y'all have any other questions, we said we do have a gentleman that performed the traffic impact study, if you have any questions for him.
So how many, so what would be the typical number of vehicles that would be dropping off children, and then what is the queuing area of this circular drive? How many vehicles can it handle?
So for staff's analysis, Mr. Halliburton, that we looked at, we made the assumption, even though the applicant has said that there may be 2 or 3 cars at a time, we're assuming that all 12 cars are going to be there present. Now, of course, as she said, there'll be times when other parents will drop off at different various intervals. We're assuming that there's going to be 12 cars there. We want a plan for the maximum. There's going to be 12 cars come into this, and we want to be able to ensure that the driveway is going to be accommodating those spaces. And so on the site plan here, you can see that we at least, Ms. Davina is prepared at least for the minimum of 3 spaces here, and with a width of the driveway being at least 15.4 feet to allow for that access. And she's dedicated at least a minimum of 3 spaces. As we said earlier, when this came before you for the family group daycare, 3 spaces was satisfactory because it was a less intensive use, and at least the minimum we were going to be understanding that even with different intervals, at least it was going to be 7. But now we're going to be having 12 cars that may be coming there, and that increased intensity may impact the staging concern, may pose staging concerns here at the roundabout if all of them come in at the same time.
So if I get the 3 spaces, but if someone was just coming in and, like you'll see at most daycares, they'll have even an awning where they can drop the kid off and they walk inside. So how many cars could be in this circular drive at any one point in time? Is it 6? Is it 5? Is it?
I think from the applicant's letter and documentation, it's been up to 6,
Okay.
6 or 5 vehicles at a time. The 3 spaces, in addition to at least 2 that are here. That's what she's outlined in her written correspondence to staff.
So I'm just talking out loud. So the way I see it, even if all these vehicles were there at the same time, you could have anywhere from 8 to 9 vehicles in this circular drive, including the 3 spots. And then that's assuming that not all 12 cars are there at the same time. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. That's kind of what, we always want to plan for the maximum, just to
Yeah.
ensure that we're addressing any types of impacts. But that's kind of what Ms. Davina has presented us with her application and her correspondence.
Any further questions for staff?
Have we had any feedback from the neighborhood?
We have not gotten any complaints. I don't know if Mr. Donovan has gotten any calls or not, but we have not had anybody really call in recently.
I have not received any calls on this application.
Do we hold the public hearing when this was first heard? The day of the sign issue? Don't we?
Yeah, I believe that's the case, but I'll defer to Mr. Hankins.
Yes, I know we held a public hearing that day. Yeah, and we held it again at the next meeting
Yeah.
to
Okay.
cure any sort of notice issues, so.
Okay, so we don't need.
There's no need for a public hearing
Okay.
today unless the board voted to suspend the rule.
I guess my thoughts were, I had a tough time with that intensive use on the cul-de-sac. And the cars coming, and that's the transportation study kind of confirmed that for me, so I'm kind of the same place where I was. I have a tough time with this one.
I mean, I get that we've got, it's just kind of like what we were looking at the Planning Commission last week or 2 weeks ago in reference to, I forget now what the retail store was going to be, but then, in essence, we made the applicant put all the parking places in that they possibly could do based upon the square footage of the building. Here, I kind of side on the side of the applicant that I'm not sure all 12 cars are going to be there at any one specific time, but I see why, as the planning department, that's what you got to look at, because, it could possibly happen. I don't know if that's necessarily realistic, but anyway,
Even still, you're only talking a few minutes at a time.
yeah.
If there's nothing further, I'm going to make a motion to approve the application, subject to and including the conditions of the approval of staff that were enumerated as like 8 different things. I was reading the report that the consultant had, and the recommendation there was fine. I think, if memory serves, we approved a similar application a few months ago that I felt like was not as good an application request as this one. And so with giving all things together, I think they've addressed what questions I had as far as the adverse effects on the adjacent property with the plans that they have, with the parking, the way all of that's going to be designed, with the fencing that they're going to put up, or if they may have already done, and with what they've already done. So I move to approve the application.
I'm going to second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll for us?
Mr. Tibbs?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
No. All right, that application's been approved. Appreciate everybody's time on that one. Next, we'll move to application Z24034 by Mr. Clyde Roundtree of Huddleston Steel Engineering on behalf of Veterans Plaza LLC. They're requesting an amendment to an existing special use permit to operate a self-service storage facility in a commercial fringe zone. This is for property located along the east side of Veterans Parkway, south of Cloister Drive, and the address is 4558 Veterans Parkway. The application includes the construction of a 60,000 square foot self-service storage building. Mr. Barbie, if you'd review that for us.
Good afternoon, Chair Young and members of the Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals. This next application here before you is for Blackman Plaza. You previously reviewed this application on August 28th, at which time a public hearing was also conducted. At the conclusion of the meeting, the board chose to defer action in order to allow staff and the applicant some additional time to work together to adjust the design to hopefully lessen the potential impact of shadow and building massing on the adjacent property owners. Since that time, staff provided the design team with some 3D modeling that kind of gave a better image of what this property would look like once constructed in comparison to the adjacent Cloister subdivision to the north. And we've also added in Sullivan's Retreat, which has not been constructed yet, to the south. In the images you see before you today, these have been adjusted since that time. The applicants came back with a new version, pushing the self-service storage facility further to the south. They are now providing 100 feet of separation between the cloister and the exterior wall of the self-service storage facility. In addition, our recommendation, in addition to providing that distance, was also to reduce the level of the building on that side facing the cloister to 1 story. The resubmittal that we received was to provide the 100 foot of separation and restore the building back to the full 3-story height that was in the very original submittal that we received.
Cool. Say that one more time. Are you saying that they're going back to the 3 stories, or?
Yes, sir. The submittal that you have before you is for a full 3-story building, but it has been pushed further away from the Cloister subdivision to provide 100 feet of separation. This image here gives you sort of an idea of what this building here in the center is, the self-service storage facility. The short structure to the left is the 1-story facility that they have previously approved. The structures to the right are the retail spaces that are a part of their site plan, and Sullivan's Retreat, which again has not been built yet, we have inserted in as the orange structures in the rear. Our GIS department has helped us greatly by producing some 3-dimensional images to give us a good comparison of how the cloister will look adjacent to this. The roof lines of the self-service storage facility do get kind of skewed once they do this. I have confirmed with them that this wall height that you're seeing here is accurate, and they have requested that you ignore the bizarre roof structure that's shown. But this gives an image that should reflect how that will appear once constructed. And this is in the new plan. We can give a view from pretty much any angle. If we want to rotate around, there is the Sullivan's Retreat property to the south.
Brad, can you remind us of what the buffer is, or any fencing between the cloister and this structure or structures?
Yes, sir. They are providing a 15-foot wide type D buffer in addition to a 6-foot tall opaque privacy fence. They are also, with the new site plan, they are proposing will preserve some additional space and allow them to pull grading off of the northern property line and preserve the existing trees, or have a better chance at preserving existing trees that are currently in place along this fence row that you can see here. Actually, oop, that doesn't work anymore. We've also had some adjustments. The loading unloading area is now on the north side of the building in this area. So if you should so choose to approve this application, staff does have some conditions of approval that we would recommend. That the special use permit approval is for a 3-story, approximately 74,000 square foot climate controlled self-storage facility. that the applicant shall provide a 15-foot wide type D landscape buffer per section 27 of the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance along the northern property line, that this BZA approval shall supersede all previous approvals by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The structures shall comply with the Murfreesboro design guidelines and be consistent with architectural building elevations submitted with this application. BZA approval does not imply approval of the site plan. The site plan shall be submitted for the review and approval subject to compliance with the Murfreesboro zoning code and design guidelines. And the owner shall operate the self-service storage facility in compliance with the zoning ordinance, self-service storage facilities additional standards as set forth in section 9D2 3U. A fire truck turnaround will be added to the site plan subject to the approval of the Murfreesboro Fire Rescue Department. This turnaround must be maintained or an alternative turnaround constructed and approved by the Murfreesboro Fire Department during the construction of Store Place 2, which is the building to the east. Grading and drainage will be coordinated with the adjacent property to the south, currently referred to as Sullivan's Retreat, subject to the approval of the Murfreesboro Planning Department. I'm available if you have any questions, and I believe the applicant's engineers and representative is also available here as well.
Thank you. I've got a question. Let's assume that this commercial fringe property, and they wanted a 3-story office building that wasn't storage units. Would they have that be able to be built by right?
You would be able to build that structure by right. However, the Planning Commission, I believe it's Section 8, has the authority to reduce negative impacts of potential development and require those changes. I believe in this situation, they would also be reviewing this same type of item. Matthew, would you care to give some finer points?
Good afternoon, Board of Zoning Appeals. The zoning ordinance gives the Planning Commission the authority, even for uses that are permitted by right, when they review the site plan, to place conditions upon site plan approval to mitigate negative impacts on adjacent residential areas, including arrangement of structures.
I just wondered, trying to be, we've stated our concerns with this, but don't try to be too hard on them if it was another type of use and it wasn't something that came before us, if it would be approved, and now we're giving them a tough road.
I think if it was a use that was permitted by right, we would express the same, as staff would express the same concerns to the applicants if it were an office building or another type of commercial building that was proposed, that we've expressed to them regarding how this particular building interacts with the residential uses to the north. So I think our concerns would be in either situation.
Okay.
So 2 questions. One is, has the square footage of the building increased? I know they pushed it back, and I realize we're going to 3 stories, but has the square footage of the building actually increased? That's my first question. My second question is the properties to the south, I take it they're all undeveloped at this point in time?
The adjacent property to the south is currently undeveloped.
Okay.
Yes.
And is it zoned, what is it zoned?
Planned residential district.
Okay.
And to answer your question, yes, the square footage of the building did increase. It is currently 74,000 square feet. And I believe the previous square footage was, I don't have that number with me. I want to say it was in the area of 54.
It was about 58.
58,000 square feet.
Yeah, and this comes with the section where the 3rd story was taking over the entire building. That's where you're seeing the discrepancy. So that chunk that wasn't in the last application has been added back.
Brett, what's this Sullivan's Retreat you keep referring to?
It is a planned residential district development. It's going to be residential single-family attached townhome units.
So is that going to be to the east and to the south?
It'll be to the south.
It's going to be to the south.
Yes, sir.
And that's actually a mixed-use planned development. It's got retail at the front of that development, and then townhomes to the rear to create kind of a walkable walkable commercial and residential development.
And then another question, how many, I know notices went out to the neighborhood to the north, correct?
Yes, notices would have gone to everybody
And
within.
did they have the understanding of exactly what was going to be proposed in this development?
I am unable to comment on exactly what they may or may not have understood from the letter.
Well, what was communicated to them?
It was communicated,
That it was going to be a 3-story project?
yes.
And did y'all have any feedback?
I have not received any communication.
I had received a few phone calls when the initial mailer went out. I've walked through what the proposed project was at the site. We discussed when the meeting was. So those people that made the call, a few of those were actually generated off of the sign that was out front as well. So they weren't all that just received the letters, but less than a handful of calls is what I received.
Do we have any information as to whether we gained or lost? I think we were doing the light studies last time and shadow studies, going the 3rd story but moving back. I assume we still,
The shadow study that, give me just a second, I should be able to show you how the shadow will fall. That was one of the things that our GIS department was able to add to this. And I am not quite as able to manipulate this as well as they are.
Supposed to say, I think the shadow study's in the packet there as well, Brad.
Is it in? Yeah. Let me just go to the packet.
And just to clarify, so the 3 stories was not listed specifically in the notice. It has the square footage of the building, but it did not mention 3 stories.
All right, thank you. I think that's very important to know. Also, just while he's looking, in the overview of the request, it said that the property to the south was zoned commercial highway, but you said it was PRD.
Originally, the property was zoned commercial highway, but it was changed later to a planned residential, residential
I
district,
think that makes a big difference.
planned unit district, sorry.
Okay. Thanks.
Do we know where, I know this is getting really technical, but do we know where you said it was mixed use to the south. Do we know where the commercial piece starts and end? Well, I'm sure it starts on Veterans Parkway, but do we know about where the commercial ends and the residential begins?
So if we can get City TV to switch over where you can see my screen, I'm actually pulling up the zoning now, which will give you a better idea of how that's laid out. All right. So the building that Brad is describing is setting about right here. You have the PRD section where you can see the addresses on the screen. That's Sullivan's Retreat, attached single-family housing product townhomes. The PCD that you see there, that would be directly south of the building. That's undeveloped. There's not a site plan approved on that at this time. And then Commercial Highway is out on the front portion of that property to the south. There's also there's a small parcel there that's in the PCD as well that borders this property.
So this building approximately where it would not back up to where right behind any residential units.
So you would see it about in the approximate location of where you can see my mouse.
Right.
And the first building is where you see that first address point.
Yeah.
Directly to the south of where the building would be is where there's going to be a new public street called Carolina Court coming in from Veterans Parkway that will access the townhomes. And so directly to the south of the building is where the bulb of the cul-de-sac of Carolina Court would be located.
my biggest hesitation would be is if this, I don't know what we would have accomplished. I'm just talking to the applicant now. If we're pushing this all the way back towards the south and we're right butt up against the residential structures. So it doesn't sound like that's where we're at. So at least we've gained that part of the application. You know, I'm not real thrilled about the 3-story piece, you know, being back in and you know, in the 2-story. I think moving it and keeping the 2-story on Caroline, whatever it is, Cloister, would be my better fit for this. And again, it just goes back to what we talked about before when this was original set of having these buildings so close to and you've accomplished that. You've backed off of it. You've done exactly what we've asked you to do. But it sounded like you were willing to go for a plan that didn't have as many square feet, and now since we're backing off, now we're coming back and asking for more square feet. I know the original plan was probably the amount that you're asking for now, and then you compromised. But if we could keep the 2-story on that end, I'd feel more comfortable with this plan.
Yeah, I'll give them a chance to. All right, any further questions for staff at this point? Would you like some more info to give to us?
I do have one item. I would like to remove recommended condition of approval number 3, stating that this approval shall supersede all previous approvals by the BZA. It was just pointed out that the previous approval was for the 1-story building, and this submittal does not have an impact. Will not be replacing that. So we want to make sure it stays in place.
Would you say that again?
I'm sorry?
Would you say that again?
I said we want to remove condition of approval number 3 that states that this BZA approval shall supersede all previous approvals by the BZA. It was pointed out that the previous approval was for the 1-story self-service storage facility to the east of this building, and this application will not impact that. We want to make sure that that approval remains in place.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? All right. Mr. Roundtree, anything you guys would like to add? Would you like to add any more info for us?
BZA Committee, my name is Clyde Andre, host of Steel Engineering. I'd like to bring a little bit more clarification on some of the changes because I think they were significant. As far as moving the building over, we went from 40 feet to 100 feet, so we gained 60 feet. But something else that happened in that movement was twofold. There's a really significant tree line there, which allows us to keep that intact. As Brad mentioned, it's not guaranteed, but we understand the significance of that tree line. So the buffer that we are recommending is going to follow the road circulation. So it's coming off that fence, so we're not going to encroach upon the existing vegetation at all. And then we're pulling that buffer forward. So there's actually going to be, in a weird way, kind of a gap between the residents. You know, there'll be a buffer along our driveway, then there'll be lawn area, and then there'll be the existing tree line, and then there'll be the house. So I've never done it like that before, but I feel like we're doing everything we can to try to make sure that the existing conditions of the neighbors currently stays consistent, no impact on those trees, and then allow that buffer to come real close to our structure. So that being said, it's not only 100 feet, but it's really almost like 70 feet of vegetation, you know, potentially between us, our structure, and that adjacent residence. It's only from houses 8 through 10, so we're not doing that the whole way. But not only did we move the building, but we moved everything, the circulation, the buffering, everything towards our direction. So that's what we felt like was a concession we could make while still maintaining the volume of the previous building, the original building. So we'd like to ask that you would respect that we've done everything we could to make sure to protect our client's interests in terms of what he's trying to accomplish, but also make sure the residences in Clover, our clusters, are respected. The shadow study improved significantly by moving the building further away. I think you brought out a great point. We're now moving into another residential side, but I think that's more of a, much more of a different situation. Those homes don't exist now that were mentioned, but the cloisters do. So we'd like you to just consider that the movements that we've made to try to accommodate the staff's concerns as well as our clients' concerns have been significant. The biggest one, that would still be a pretty mighty request to drop that building back down to 2. Is originally that 2-story was really to help us with those shadow impact on the adjacent neighbors. And since that's been mitigated by the distance, we feel like it's still justified to go up to 3. So that's our position if we can hold.
So just to clarify something, I don't want to infer anything here. This existing tree line that you're speaking of, why, I'm hearing verbiage like it will, I'm not hearing it will stay, I'm hearing it will probably stay. So why wouldn't it stay if it's that far away?
The distance would allow it to stay. It's just, we probably wouldn't be able to put it contractually because you just never know how trees respond to construction anywhere in proximity to it. But the distance should not encroach upon those drip lines. Everything that would secure those trees is intact from a distance standpoint. It's just something that we all know that trees die and there's almost no way to keep that from happening.
I see.
But we're not going to do anything negative to impact those trees based on the distance we are away from them.
Okay.
Do we have an aerial photo of that? Helps me a whole lot more to actually see that where the property lines are with respect to what you're telling us.
So you should be able to see the current ortho that we have. And this area right here is what corresponds to the gap that you're able to see on the, so you're looking at 8, 9, and 10. And it's these 3 lots, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, and yeah, I understand what you're saying, but pretty much half of those houses will walk out on their back porch and they're going to see this 3-story building. Am I wrong? I mean, you're saying where the building is, it's going to block, but it's more of a visual than it is the shade. I can't get away from the fact that anecdotally and just talking around and by virtue of my experiences and the businesses and all that I'm in, having discussions with people, about so-and-so facility, if I'd have known that was there, I would have never lived, Well, these people didn't get that opportunity. So that's kind of in the back of my mind on that. So without belaboring the point, I just wanted to see what that looked like. Thanks.
My name's Christian Noble. I'm one of the architects working on the project. I just wanted to speak to kind of the building size and the shape and what we were trying to do to accommodate the comments that were received by staff and at the last BZA meeting. Originally, we had submitted, based on the typical zoning regulations, a 3-story building that was within about 40 feet of the property line, based on again, back and forth with the staff and so on. That's when the request was made to step the north end of the building down to 2 feet. That 2-story building was still within 40 feet and it had the minimum 15-foot buffer at that end. And so what we did between the last meeting and now was study, how far could we push the building in its entirety, and what would be the impact of the 3-story portion of the building relative to the previous locations. The 3-story building has been pushed additionally further away, even with that step, by at least 20 feet. So the reason we didn't, do an incremental step where we did a 2 or even a 1-story building between that was, as Mr. Roundtree spoke about, we've been able to create what's roughly a 40-foot wide landscape buffer, which is that area that we didn't have, that we're hoping to maintain the existing tree line, whichever ones are healthy enough to last, some of those trees may be as tall or taller than these structures, definitely the home as well. So rather than just rely on a new growth buffer based on the standards, we think pushing the whole building, not just a portion of the building, pushing the whole building to that 100 feet, which is many times the setback. And I understand that that's why we're having this conversation, is there's deference being given to the neighbors at the north, like you said, that had no choice. They've lived there already. So, going from 40 feet, which technically wasn't even at the setback previously, to 100 feet, it's created a pretty wide swath of that property that is going to be dedicated to landscaping, hopefully maintaining these existing tall trees. And then the only other thing in between is site circulation and parking spaces at that end. Otherwise, that part of the property would be pretty undevelopable as is, which is why we pushed it down to the corner. And like you said, some of the reason that the building is, from square footage standpoint, larger is because we don't have a circulation around the entire building now, because we wanted to push it that far away, is that the shape of the building just changed a little bit. There's still some notches to create the articulation that's desired by the design guidelines. But so anyway, I just wanted to give that little bit of kind of history as to how the project developed from a 3-story building at 40 feet to a 2-story building at 40 feet, with that step now to, yes, a 3-story building, but no portion of that building is closer than 100 feet to the property line, along with the what allows us to do a larger landscape buffer as well. So.
Can I show you one thing real quick?
Sure.
Computer wasn't working correct, so this is, if you guys have read, that shows you how we're creating the buffer. We're actually following the circulation line, leaving those trees untouched.
And actually, we've seen that on our
Oh, you
screen.
see it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
what-
yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about. I guess since we don't know for sure what's going to be at the south, but we think there is, at the moment, there's some residential. That area is not getting the same consideration as what we're giving the north, the current homes. I don't know whether that's makes sense to, but if the southern property was developed at all with homes, I think we'd have a tough time. What sort of buffer is there as it's scooted? I guess, can this image be? Okay.
Is that what you're after, Chair Young?
Roughly, right. But that's probably a minimum setback from that side, and 3 stories. And granted, that might be the road coming in there, but maybe. It says 10-foot side setback. Is that what we're dealing with?
Not sure if they have it labeled.
There's approximately, I believe, 20 feet between the property line and the building in that corner. See if I can.
Yeah, it's 20, it's labeled
Okay.
right there.
You might try that 3-dimensional view the GIS prepared. That shows where the residential buildings are.
Yeah, it doesn't show property lines, but it gets fairly close. sorry, was the question if about the buffer type?
Just thinking through, and not in a specific question. I guess my thought was, while you honored our request of helping the north, we're created the issue on the south if there were homes there. Now, there's not, so I don't know whether that's a valid something to worry about or throw any alarms up about. But just as I'm weighing the pros and cons of this one, that's kind of where my
Good
thoughts are
afternoon,
going.
Chairman Young, members of the board. Try to give you a little something to help you there. I've been in contact with Matt Taylor about this, about our development and his development. Both our development and his development have agreed to give slope easements to each other, so the developer of that south side is definitely aware of what's going on.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. I think Mr. Roundtree mentioned on the view shed from those homes to the north that are directly in line with the building, gaining the 100 feet, but adding the third story, they are better off, I guess, as angles and where you're sitting.
Absolutely. And let me, I guess, get a little technical while we know this is going to work. The way we had it, we had a type D buffer up against their property line. And that means we're grading along their property line. We're going to kill whatever trees are there, and then we're going to plant our trees. Now we're moving off of it. So we're not grading in that area. So those bigger trees, which are a better buffer that's existing, will remain. Now, what we've agreed to do is not only do the type D buffer along our development, but we're also going to have the fence there also. But we're going to plant the same amount of trees that are required, even if the fence wasn't. We're going to plant the same amount of trees that are required if we didn't do a fence. But we agreed to do the fence and the trees in the buffer also.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. I guess remind me, do we need a public hearing on this? Did we handle that in our previous
I
meeting?
think this one was also done at the last
Okay.
meeting, so it's down to deliberation.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or?
I'm going to trust what y'all are saying. Because I told myself I would never vote for something that would be like what happened on Cason Lane. I'm going to make a motion we approve, subject to all comments that are made. Do I need to go through these items?
No, but I would like to remind you that we asked for condition 3 to be excluded.
Okay. And my motion would include that condition 3 be excluded.
Yeah, Mr. Halliburton, if you're comfortable and in agreement with all the comments that staff made inside the report, those can be incorporated by reference.
Okay. That would include all comments.
The motion, I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? If you'd call the roll for us.
Mr. Tips?
Abstain.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye.
Chair Young, I think with the abstention, we only had 2 members eligible to vote at that point, which is less than the quorum.
Okay, I'll vote no.
All right. I think the outcome is still, motion passes, the application passes, correct?
Yes, with the no vote, now we have a number of votes equaling a quorum, so
Okay.
now the vote can be approved.
All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate everybody's time and work on it.
We appreciate staff doing the work hard.
Thank you. Next application is Administrative Appeal, Application Z24024 by Sean Henry representing AutoZone, appealing the decision of the zoning administrator regarding whether a proposed use at 810 Northwest Broad Street constitutes distribution of automobile parts and components, which is not permitted in commercial highway. I know if you want to address
Yes, good
where
afternoon,
you
Board of
stand with
Zoning
that.
Appeals. You should have a letter in front of you from Sean Henry, who represents AutoZone. And in the letter, they're requesting that, that this matter be deferred until the November 26th date. We've had some movement in working through some opportunities with their application, and so I think that, or through their appeal, so I think that we're still moving forward in a positive direction. So if the board is willing to defer this until the November 26th meeting, the city agrees with that also.
So moved.
Second, I'd like to make a comment, though. I just publicly would like to say how much I appreciate y'all trying to work this through. I don't mean work it through. Work with the applicant to see if it can work in the end is a better way to say it. But thank you.
Yes, certainly.
All right, we have a motion and a second for deferral. If you'd call the roll for us.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. All right, so that one's been deferred till November. Next item, under new business, a special use permit, application Z24037 by Mr. Jim Lukens of Ware Malcolm on behalf of Doors of Hope. They're requesting a special use permit to establish and operate a transitional home in a residential duplex for property on 434 East Bell Street. Mr. Aguilera, if you'd review this one for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair Young. This item before you all is a special use permit request in order to establish and expand a transitional home use at 434 East Bell Street. The applicant, Doors of Hope, represented by Jim Lukens, is requesting a special use permit to, again, establish the transitional home use, but also to construct a 2,275 square foot building addition for their transitional home use operation. Again, this is going to be, I'm scrolling to the site plan so you all can see this right now, but this is at the property of 434 East Bell. Per the attached letter, Doors of Hope has been operating in this area, in this intersection, providing counseling and other transitional services to Murfreesboro since 2011. At the property located at 428, it's the adjacent property located here. They've been operating in that location since 2011. In 2017, Doors of Hope purchased this property, subject property that's before you today at 434 East Bell Street. They purchased that to be used for their clients, for their reentry program. They've been using this for a mixture of uses, but mainly as for their reentry program. No special use permit was obtained at that time in 2017 when operations first began. And so to rectify this issue, staff communicated early on with them that in order to do this proposed addition for their transitional home use, staff requested that they submit this application to establish the special use and for the proposed expansion. So as stated previously, Doors of Hope currently utilizes the existing building at 434 East Bell for its reentry program, housing of clients, and for other counseling and other recovery services. The square footage of the existing house, of the existing structure that is there, is 2,230 square feet. Again, for the proposed building here, as you can see, that proposed addition will be 2,275 square feet, which will allow Doors of Hope to continue to house clients that are on site. There are no anticipated changes with 428 East Bell Street or their property located across the street here. It's not shown on their overall map, but there will not be any anticipated changes for this property here at 421 East Bell Street. The surrounding land uses around this property are OGR and RSA to the west, OGR to the north, and to the south and east CMR. So there's a mixture of uses here, a mixture of residential uses and institutional type uses here that are both operated by Doors of Hope, but also to MTSU to the east, and again, a mixture of residential uses. As shown on the attached elevations that I'll scroll through here, As you can see, the proposed addition will continue the same architectural character of the existing building and neighborhood by utilizing hardy board siding and shingle roofing. The proposed addition will look and function as a single-family detached dwelling unit. The height of the proposed addition is going to be 34.7 feet, which complies with the height standards of the OGR zone district. The location of the proposed building addition does comply with the setbacks of a property zoned OGR and located in the city core overlay district. As a reminder, this property here located on East Bell is located in the city core overlay district, so there are going to be some different setback standards which allow it to encroach a little further to keep consistent with the neighborhood, so it does comply with those standards. Under the OGR zone district for offices and other uses, again, this is not residential, this is not office, this is other uses here for a transitional home. There is no maximum lot coverage requirement. I know that you all probably seen with the site plan, it seems to be pretty substantial, but the staff was able to review this use and the property, and there is no maximum lot coverage for this, so they would be able to go up to that, to the square footage they're wanting to do. Staff and the applicant worked together to ensure that parking and circulation would be managed efficiently, and the design of the site would be handled correctly, so it would be, again, all contained on site. The zoning ordinance parking standard for transitional home use, I'm going to go back to the parking so you can see it here. That is required from them is 1 space for each 3 beds, or 3 spaces, whichever is greater. In the existing structure, there is approximately 8 beds, and with this proposed structure, the new structure that's being constructed, that will be constructed here, there's going to be an additional 8 bedrooms for a total of 16 beds. So, per the parking formula in the zoning ordinance, they are required to have a total of 5 spaces. As you can see on the site plan here, the applicant has proposed 3 spaces plus ADA spaces, and so what the applicant has proposed is a parking agreement. As you can see on your staff report, that is that in that first page there, we've kind of gone into detail of that parking arrangement. And so the applicant has proposed a parking agreement as a solution to alleviate the constraints they feel the site faces. Because this is a corner lot, they will have to do the parking, the landscaping, and other types of on-site improvements that they are required to do with this expansion. And so per section 26 of the off-street parking, Section 3 of the zoning ordinance, joint use of the required off-street parking spaces between 2 parcels can be approved by the planning director. Doors of Hope has prepared a joint agreement between 434 and 428 East Bell Street. Again, that is that property that's located across the street here, and to allocate 2 of the required 5 spaces to be located on 428 East Bell Street. Staff has reviewed the request further and determined that the agreement is compliant with the requirements of Section 26. One of the requirements that we have in our zoning ordinance, we want to ensure that when an applicant is proposing a parking agreement, we want to ensure that we're not taking any of the adjacent properties' required parking spaces. We don't want to make sure that there is a deficiency in parking with the other adjacent property. And so in review of that, one of the things that they have in their agreement that they have said that is they've provided the number of spaces. They've calculated the number of spaces they are required for their site and told us the number of required parking spaces that they are required to meet. And so 428 has a total of 15 spaces, but is only required to have 11 parking spaces and would thus allow for the joint use of the parking between the 2 parcels. Again, the site on 428 is an office use, mainly used for, again, their staff there. And so the square footage and doing that calculations, they're only required to have 11 spaces. So they can afford to dedicate 2 spaces for the new proposed addition on 434. The legal department will be working with the applicant's lawyer to finalize the language of the agreement so that it will be properly recorded with the Office of the Register of Deeds. To ensure that the applicant satisfies this requirement, staff will require that the parking agreement be recorded as a condition of approval of this special use. This ensures, again, that staff wanted to make this as a condition of approval to ensure that, again, that this carries with the land, that we're ensuring that this is properly recorded and it puts future property owners on notice. And should that ever change, it will involve the city to ensure that they're not going to be having any future parking constraints, whether it be for a residential use or another office type user. So that puts them on notice, and that's why we made that as a condition. Per Section 9 of the zoning ordinance, the applicant is required to provide evidence demonstrating that they meet the general standards of applicability. There are no additional standards for traditional homes. There are only mainly the general standards of applicability, which accounts for, again, mitigating any kind of impact and ensuring that there's not going to be any impact to the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood. As outlined by staff, staff believes that that this proposed expansion and this use should not have any substantial or adverse effects to the adjacent property or the property owners or the neighborhood. As stated by the applicant, Doors of Hope has been operating in this area for 5 years with staff has not had any complaints or heard any complaints in those 5 years since they've been operating in this area. The proposed addition will be built as a single-family dwelling. Again, it will mimic the character of the existing neighborhood and will kind of, again, operate as a single-family dwelling unit. So it will maintain, the existing character of the neighborhood. As for the second standard, the general standards of applicability, parking and everything in the existing facilities, that's one of the other biggest concerns that we wanted to make sure. And with this proposed addition, the siding material and the parking that is here, staff believes that that agreement will satisfy these conditions as well. With there being ample space on 428 East Bell Street, the adjacent property, staff believes that they can allocate those 2 additional spaces and still be able to meet the parking requirements here on site. This will be a one entry, one exit site to ensure that there's going to be no conflict with on-site parking. And as you can see that here, they will enter in off of East Bell Street and exit off of Lee Street. And so with that configuration of the site, we believe that it has this proposed addition and this transitional home use will be handled efficiently. There are no historic or any real natural features located on the site currently. Staff is not able to identify, and the applicant is not aware of any at all, so there will be no destruction or harm of any of those types of features. Again, there are no additional standards for a transitional home use, and staff believes that the applicant does comply with the general standards of applicability for a transitional home use and to expand a traditional home use. Staff recommends that should you all approve this special use permit based on meeting these said standards, staff recommends that it recommend approval based on the following 2 conditions that are listed in your staff report. I'm here if you have any questions. We have somebody from Doors of Hope as well for any questions. And Mr. Jim Lukens is here, the engineer who did the site plan, is also here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Aguilera now?
I got one. So, and I think we asked this a lot, but if we approve this special use permit for this transitional home, this special use permit ends when, if and when there is a subsequent owner of this property. Is that a correct statement?
So if there's a change of use of the property, that is correct. We would look at
I'm not saying change of use. I'm saying change of owner.
Change of owner.
Yeah.
So we would look to see who that owner is, but if there is a change of owner, let's say there's a different nonprofit that comes in that wants to use this property, we would see what type of nonprofit organization are they proposing. What is it? Is it consistent with this approval? If not, then I think we would probably say that that necessitates a different type of application. I don't know, Mr. Donovan or Mr. Blommy, is that correct?
The only comment I have, I trust that Doors of Hope would take care of this because I'm very familiar with the program. There are other transitional housing that are downtown that don't look very well. And so what I would be afraid of is if the ownership changed, then they may not care for the property as Doors of Hope would. Mm-hmm. That's why I'd like to make a condition of approval that it does not transfer to a new owner.
Yeah, and that's what you would need to do because the way this is set up, it would run with the land. If you remember on our home daycares, typically those are extinguished, but we add that as a condition. Okay. So if that's the intent of the board, you would need to add that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Thank you. Mr. Lukens or anyone else want to present any other information on this application, feel free. Have any questions for?
No.
All right, thanks. This time we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application if you come forward? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments and conditions, including that this special use permit would expire if there is a new owner involved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, if you'll call the roll for us.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. Right, that application's been approved. Appreciate the information and time. Next item, staff reports and other business. Do we have anything to discuss, review?
I do not have anything for you, Chair Young.
All right. If not, then we will adjourn.